Have you ever felt like you're waiting for permission to live the life you actually want? Like there's some invisible checklist that you have to complete before you're allowed to take up space or speak up or go after the things that call to you. Most people don't think of themselves as risk-averse. They tell themselves that they're just being responsible, that they'll make the move when they're more qualified or more ready, more financially stable. But that moment of being ready never actually arrives. And in the meantime, someone else, someone with less experience, less talent, fewer credentials, is already out there doing the thing that you keep putting off. I see this all the time. People with big ideas who stay stuck in a research mode. Or people who wait until they're 100% confident before they make a move, as if confidence just magically appears before action, instead of being something you build through action. I used to be one of those people. Well, in some ways. There were areas of my life where I had audacity to spare, so to speak. I'd raise my hand first, take the stage without thinking, volunteer for things that I had no business volunteering for. But in other areas, I was frozen. If I had to speak up for myself or make a simple phone call that felt confrontational, it's like my brain would convince me that this was the moment everything would fall apart. It didn't really make sense. I could get up in front of thousands of people and say whatever, but tell my mom I was going to be late? That was terrifying. At some point, I had to stop and ask myself, what's actually stopping me? Was it fear? Was it a need for approval? Was it that sneaky voice in my head saying, "Who do you think you are?" And once I started paying attention, I realized just how much of my life was dictated by these invisible rules that I had never agreed to. Rules about what's acceptable, what's smart, what's realistic. But who made those rules? And more importantly, who's actually benefiting from me following them? If you've been listening for a while, you might recall my irrational fear of speaking up during massages. It's the dumbest thing. But for years, I would just lay there, letting someone grind into my muscles like they were kneading bread, even when I hated every second of it. And I knew it made no sense. But in the moment, it was like I was wearing these invisible chains or there was a wall or something. Like I needed some big reason to justify saying, "Hey, could you go just a little bit lighter?" But that's the thing about fear. It rarely makes sense. But it does show us where we've been trained to shrink. So let me ask you, where are you holding back? What opportunities are you watching pass you by while you tell yourself someday? And what if waiting was actually the bigger risk? Today, our guest is Anne-Marie Anderson. She's an award-winning sports broadcaster and keynote speaker who's built her career by making bold, audacious choices, even when they scared the hell out of her. But when a tragic event earlier in her career forced her to confront how quickly life can change, she decided that she was done waiting. And she's here to help you stop waiting too. So in this conversation, you'll learn the 4 biggest barriers that keep people stuck and how to move past them. How to cultivate everyday audacity, even if you don't think of yourself as a risk taker. And the surprising way to reframe fear so it stops running the show. I'm fascinated by the mind-body connection, especially how our gut health affects everything, from our mood to our sleep. After years of trying a bunch of different approaches, I realized something really important. What works for one person might be completely wrong for another. And that's what makes Zoe so different from other nutrition companies. They've created the most scientifically advanced at-home gut test and build the world's largest microbiome database. So when they analyze your results, they're not just giving you generic advice. They're giving you insights specifically for your body that other companies just don't have the science to provide. Think about it. How many times have you tried a healthy diet that just didn't work for you? Or felt really confused by conflicting nutrition advice? Zoe cuts through all of that with hard science. Their approach is so effective that in their randomized controlled trial, participants were 4 times more likely to report better sleep and more energy. But what I appreciate the most is that they're fighting against all of the misleading nutrition information out there. When big food companies are paying influencers to promote ultra-processed foods as healthy, we need science, and I mean real science, not paid for science, more than ever. Go to Zoe.com and find out what Zoe membership could do for you. And because you listen to Mind Love, you can use the exclusive code MINDLOVE10 to get 10% off membership. As a Zoe member, you'll get an at-home test kit and personalized nutrition program to help you make smarter food choices that support your gut. That's ZOE.com. Use code MINDLOVE10 at checkout. Trust your gut, trust Zoe.
So I have a concept in the book called your front row. And your front row is a carefully curated group of people who are doing big things and want to see you succeed. Now, here's the thing, the trick with the front row. It's probably not your mom, and it's probably not your best friend, because they don't want to see you get hurt, right? They want you to be safe. So your front row are people who are going to hold you accountable and call you to action. So I suggest getting a few friends and telling them the big thing that you want to do. And for me, it was like, okay, I want to write a book. Here's what it is. And it can also be, honestly, like, I don't want to be a downer, but a negative thing. Okay, we're getting divorced and I need some support for that too. And here's what it is and here's what I need. And then they check in with you and hold you accountable.
Turn up your frequency with Mind Love. Bite-sized brain hacks for seekers, dreamers, and doers. It's time to give your mind a little love with your host, Melissa Monti.
What made you decide that cultivating Audacity was going to be part of your life story?
I didn't decide. I started living audaciously because I had a tragedy happen at work, where a colleague of mine passed away really unexpectedly at 37 years old, newly married, just starting his dream job, super fit, and just an aneurysm took his life. And I was 23. He was 37, and I was just really stunned. I had been doing CPR on him, and it was unsuccessful. And so as I sat there next to him, I thought, wow, if it can all be ripped away at 37, newly married, when you're starting your dream job, I'm not going to wait for anything ever again. So I feel like it wasn't necessarily a choice for me. It was really handed to me in my face that waiting doesn't work, and that I decided then I was never going to wait ever again for anything.
Wow. So you didn't even just witness it. You were actually involved in trying to save him.
Yes. Yes.
At 23, that would probably shake me up a little bit too and cause me to question some things. So you had this realization, but I know a lot of us, we take a while to understand what the realizations mean. We're just kind of shaken. What happened after that?
I just started to take more risks. Like, I think I was a rule follower. I was not born audacious. That's the big thing I get from people because of my career in television and because I speak publicly as a keynote speaker, and right, they think maybe I'm just outgoing, and I'm definitely not. But I think as a result of Peter's passing so suddenly, and I just started thinking, yeah, I may as well. Like, I may as well try. I may as well go for it, because, what's the worst that could happen?
What are some of the biggest fears and excuses that you think hold people back from actually living a little more loudly?
Yeah, I think there's 4. In fact, I know there's 4 with all the research I've done that helped me write the book. There's 4 that it always comes down to: fear, time, money, or your inner critic, or some combination of all 4 of those. Those are the barriers that stand between us and the things we want to do and the places we want to go.
And so how does one recognize if they're allowing that to hold us back, or if it's just one of those excuses, and then where do they go? Because what I've found is a lot of people don't necessarily see their excuses so clearly. They're just like, oh, well, it's not the right time. Like, I would know if I should be doing this. Like, they think they're going to have some more clarity other than just a choice that they're making. So how do they kind of backtrack to see that this is what it is?
Well, that's a big part of why I wrote the book, because people always tell you, like, go for it. Just go for it. Swing. Yeah, you can do it. And it's like, well, how? And so I believe, first of all, you got to figure out not only what is it that you want to do, but why you want to do it. Melissa, I think motivation is really important. Are you doing it because you want to impress somebody else, because you want to prove somebody wrong, because you want more money? I don't find that those ever work, that kind of motivation. It needs to be kind of an intrinsic motivation. And then once you know why you're doing it, then figuring out what's in your way, and it's examining it. It's separating yourself a little bit from the emotion and getting curious. So, for example, for fear, which was my big barrier, there's fear of judgment, exposure, embarrassment, failure, whatever it is. And it's getting curious about that. And then recognizing that you're never going to overcome your fears. I hate that phrase, like conquer your fears, overcome your fears. Like it's never going to go away. It's part of life and part of the process. So it's deciding to take fear on the trip with you, like to make friends with fear, recognize it's going to be there. It's going to be telling you some things. Just don't let it be your decision maker.
Yeah. And eventually I've found my fear gets a little desensitized the more I do something. But yeah, that first time of doing something new or putting yourself out there, being exposed a little more than you're used to can be terrifying. For me, I love what you said about understanding that underlying fear, because people will just be like, well, I'm afraid, but it's like, afraid of what? Like really sit there, allow yourself to come to conclusions, like see what comes up for you, because you can either work with that a little bit better. Like I realize sometimes I react to something as though I'm going to suddenly fail and then become homeless and die.
Right.
So then I have to sit there and be like, is there even a chance of me being homeless? Like,
right.
Luckily, I actually have enough family where I think if I got to my very rock bottom and needed somewhere to live, like somebody would take me in. You know?
Yes, exactly. I call that catastrophizing. We're exactly aligned, Melissa. I call it catastrophizing to the point where you die destitute and alone. Exactly that. And that's, if I can give you an example of how that worked for me, when I was a producer at ESPN for 10 years before I decided to go on camera. And in order to go on camera, I was just terrified. And long story short, my first time on camera ended up being on ESPN2, which was not the plan. It was supposed to be like on a little regional network. And ESPN2 was in 70 million homes. So that's my first time on live television. And I was terrified. And my husband at the time, talking to me as I'm outside the stadium and I'm on the phone with him and I'm teary. And he said, Emery, what's the worst that could happen? And I thought, oh, you want to know the worst? Like, I can tell you the worst that's going to happen. I could be so bad that not only will I never get another job on camera, but nobody I produce for will ever listen to me again once they see I can't do their job. And I could lose my entire career in television. And if I lose my career, I'm going to be a nightmare to live with because this is all I've ever wanted to do. And then I won't be able to be a good mom to our kids who aren't even born yet, by the way. And I could die destitute and alone. And he was like, wow, you went there. And I was like, yeah, this is bad. But just as you said, destitute and alone, probably not going to happen. Win an Emmy Award your first time out, also probably not going to happen. Outcome is going to be somewhere in the middle.
Right. And I can't help but think about Dan Harris of 10% Happier, who actually had a panic attack on live TV. And he's made an entire career out of that origin story.
That's right. That's right.
So you never know, even your worst case scenario could lead to an outcome that you couldn't have planned.
Exactly. I love Dan Harris for that reason, right? Being vulnerable and showing it. Yes.
A big part of overcoming Audacity is taking big risks. But we have to be honest and say, like, not all risks are smart. You can look at my 20-year-old self for that. I was the most reckless person. It became really clear later on. I was like, oh, that's what happens when you don't value life very much. And so how do you decide? Because that's how people's nervous systems are often reacting. They're sitting there and they are catastrophizing. And so all of those fears seem real. And some of them, yes, maybe they realize, okay, I'm reacting like I'm going to be homeless and die, and that's not going to happen. But this other thing could happen, similar to your story that you shared with your husband. It could have happened, you know? How do you decide, okay, this one's worth it, this one's reckless?
Perfect, because those are the two phrases I use all the time. It depends a little bit on all the potential outcomes and the period in your life. So to your point, like when I was 26, I think I left ESPN because I wanted to be LA bureau producer and they didn't have that spot available. So I left a dream job with no job prospects and drove across the country. If I did that now as a mother of three, totally reckless, right? But then knowing that I could grind, I had some savings, it ended up like, as I measured it, what the potential outcomes were, I wasn't going to leave a bunch of people homeless, right? Not my whole family homeless. And it ended up being worth it. And as a result of like taking that risk, by the end of the first year in LA, ESPN had hired me back at double the salary. So, trying to analyze where it is in your life. And I think an important part deciding what's reckless and what's worth it is looking at the array of possible outcomes. Like, I really cringe when somebody says, I want to start a business, great, and I've put all my life savings into it. Because we're learning from each perceived failure, right? I don't even use the word failure, but each time something doesn't work, to adjust our path. So chips all in at the beginning probably is a little bit reckless. So it's a matter of really asking that and looking at all the potential outcomes.
Yeah, I had to play around in a few different areas before I even found what was right for me, let alone what is going to be successful for in general. And I think that's something a lot of people overlook. They're like, well, I'm going to try this and let's see what happens. Also consider that this is your first time going out there. There's going to be a lot that you discover about yourself, the parts that you like, the parts that you don't, which parts you want to outsource. If this is the wrong idea altogether, like I said, I played around for years before I was like, oh, this. And then when I chose Mind Love, it was very clear and I was very confident in that decision. But before that choice point, I wouldn't have been able to explain the difference in the confidence levels of all the things until I really, really felt it. Before I was just
right.
like, hey, I just have to choose really hard. I need to share something that just changed the way I run my own business. You know that moment when you're drowning in work and realize that you needed help on your team yesterday? Been there, which is exactly why I started using Indeed. Look, I'm going to give it to you straight because I wish someone had told me this sooner. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. I used to waste so much time posting jobs everywhere, hoping the right person would somehow find me. But Indeed's sponsored jobs changed everything. Your post goes right to the top where the best candidates are actually looking. And sponsored jobs on Indeed get 45% more applications than regular posts. But here's the part that matters. They're actually qualified people. No more sorting through hundreds of random resumes. And the best part, you're not locked into anything. No monthly fees, no contracts. You just pay when it works. It's kind of wild, actually. In the time we've been talking, 23 people just got hired through Indeed. That's their real data, not just marketing fluff. There's no need to wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/mindlove. Just go to Indeed.com/mindlove right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/mindlove. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need. When it comes to grocery shopping and meal planning, I have this problem. Time. With work and everything else going on, just finding time to cook healthy meals almost seems impossible. And when someone says a meal is quick and easy, it usually isn't. But that'll change thanks to Hungry Root. It's the easiest way to eat healthy. And I mean actually easy. What I love about Hungry Root is they're actually fast meals. I go in phases. Sometimes I'm making these super fancy recipes, but then for 2 weeks straight, my family is getting the quick and easy meals. And that's when Hungry Root is a lifesaver. When they say their recipes take 15 minutes or less, they're not lying. Plus, they have amazing variety now. Hungry Root works like having your own personal shopper and nutritionist. They take care of the weekly grocery shopping on multiple levels, both meal plans and actual groceries. And they'll recommend healthy foods based on your taste and your health goals. The variety is awesome. Over 15,000 recipes, plus healthy groceries like smoothies, snacks, and ready-to-eat meals. And what's really cool is how their recommendations get smarter over time. They learn exactly what you like, which means less thinking for me. You're going to love Hungry Root as much as I do. Take advantage of this exclusive offer. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box. Plus, get a free item in every box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/mindlove and use code mindlove. That's hungryroot.com/mindlove, code mindlove, to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. hungryroot.com/mindlove, code mindlove.
Right. So careful. And the confidence, I always say confidence is an important part of Audacity, but it's not the whole thing. Because it's the confidence is the belief in yourself, right? And then the audacity part is taking the risk. And so marrying those two things together, like I believe in myself and that I will survive no matter what the outcome is. For me, it's really important that people understand like audacity, which by definition is taking a bold risk, isn't attached to the outcome. It's attached to the action. The fact that you're taking an action, that's the win in audacity. The outcome you'll always survive, live with, and adjust to.
That's a good distinction because I think sometimes the connotations we have with words like confidence can stop people from doing something because they're like, well, I don't feel confident enough to do this. And it's like, because you're not doing it. Like you build the confidence by having enough audacity to do something a couple of times while it's super scary. Right. You start to build this other thing called confidence, and you really can't have that without a little bit of audacity.
Exactly.
If you don't have the audacity, if you only have the confidence with everything and none of the fear, it's probably a little delusion.
Right. Like I say for audacity, like there's three components in my mind. All right. There's that mindset, which is optimism, right? Optimism that things are going to work out. You're playing in a basketball game, you're down by 12 at the half. Why do you play the second half? Like maybe things will work out. But even if it doesn't work out the way you wanted, you'll survive it. And then the second part is the action, because you can sit on your couch all day long being optimistic, but not take that action. And so those two married together equals your audacious identity. And as you're talking about, there's this distinction also with the word cocky, right? Where you're talking about confident, but if you're not a little bit nervous, like maybe you're delusional in terms of it. The definition of cocky, I learned because I thought, my father had said to me once, Amory, you're getting cocky when I was 11. And I was devastated by it until I looked it up at 50 something. And it said, so sure of one's abilities that it annoys other people. And I thought, wait a second, sure of one's abilities? Yes. This is literally Webster's definition. That it annoys other people, that's not necessarily my problem. But I thought cocky was like so sure of one's abilities, but doesn't have the skills to back it up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're changing my life right now.
I know.
I've never wanted to be so cocky in my life. Yeah. I've definitely been called that before.
Yeah, like, but that's what we get sometimes, especially as women, like, oh, it's just so audacious or, cocky. And then I thought, wait a second, that it annoys other people, my confidence. My kids would call that OPP, other people's problems.
We've been talking a lot about audacity without actually using the word in my house this last week because my sister-in-law's visiting. And so we're just telling stories of our lives and whatever. And my husband always says this, my personality confuses him because I'll be the first to like raise my hand, even if I don't know what they're calling me for. I've like ended up on stage in front of thousands of people dancing a dance I don't know. And I'm just fine. Like I thrive for those things. But then like making a phone call to like a customer service agent, I want nothing to do with telling my mom I'm going to be late. It's like I freeze up like I'm going to be homeless and die. And so I guess I was born a little audacious, but what I've understood in the last few years is I think some of it, ironically, wasn't really around, like people assume I was always good with vulnerability, and it wasn't necessarily that. It was just like, be so big, people don't get close. So it was a form of protection. And so like I'd throw out my deepest, darkest, supposed to be embarrassing secret and just like say it kind of cocky,
interesting.
And it was so, because I knew that's how you kind of take control of the narrative. You just put it out there and then they have to take it the way I gave it. But then, yeah, like I said, it would be so out there that people wouldn't question, but they also wouldn't get close.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that's my experience with audacity. I don't know what that says about me, but I've been thinking about it a lot lately. But
that's interesting because like, where's the bold, like if audacity is bold risk, right? A willingness to take bold risks. Is it audacious in the fact that you shared it? Is that what you're saying? Like, right? The audacity is sharing something and having the risk of being rejected.
That and doing something so crazy that like should be embarrassing, like not having the problem to I don't know, go up on stage and embarrass myself or whatever. I was just like, what do you mean embarrass myself? That embarrassment is my choice. I get to choose how I feel about this. And I think that's so relatable to Audacity in general because people think that it's like, well, I gotta be audacious and go embarrass myself. And it's like, no, you don't. You just have to go do the thing and then choose how you're going to feel about it afterwards.
Yes, right. And choose whose opinion is going to matter to you. That's a really, really big one. Like, again, working in television, right? We got social media, lovely as it is. So if somebody's criticizing me from, the basement and their mother's couch eating chips, like that doesn't hold a lot of value for me. But if it's somebody whose work I admire or a colleague of mine is giving me, that's different. So part of it too is understanding like, who are you going to allow? Laura Gassner-Otting wrote a book called Limitless. And in it, she says, don't give a vote to someone who shouldn't even have a voice. And I love that because as you said, like you're up on stage and it could be embarrassing. Well, that's only if you valued the opinion of people that you don't know who, I don't know, might cringe.
Right. It reminds me of the many quotes that float around like, the only person criticizing you is the person that's doing less than you.
Yeah.
It's so true because it's like I can see people get out there and maybe they post their first podcast episode and it's like I have close to 500. And so maybe I even do realize like, wow, this is actually a really bad episode. But all I feel is awesome. I am so glad that this person just did this. And like you risk being bad because you have to get over that initiation if you want to actually become like one of the people that you are looking up to. But you have to choose. Am I looking up to this person or am I looking up to my cousin who has a 9 to 5 and has criticized me her whole life? And no matter what I do, will probably figure out a way to criticize me. And so many of these things, it's kind of like we were talking about the fear. We don't sit with ourselves long enough to really understand either way. What am I really afraid of? Or on the other side, okay, how do I make this worth it? Like before I do something that I know is going to be a lot of work, like any new work project, launching this podcast, launching different courses, I have to sit there and like get everything out. Some of the answers I don't know yet. It's like, okay, why am I doing this? Now, what's the deeper why to that? Now, what about like, is this attached to my legacy? Who am I going to help? How is that going to feel? Like I have to really make it all feel as visceral as possible. Because if I don't, I know that I'll burn out or I'll lose my motivation. I'll lose my understanding of why I'm doing this. And then all of a sudden, all of the hardships are going to outweigh my motivation. So I have to figure out how to get that out of me. It's my responsibility to get myself so motivated that suddenly it's something that I can't not do.
Yes, that makes sense to me. But that's you making time for what's important and not just urgent. Like that's another barrier, actually, kind of let us into. But like that's you prioritizing, hey, this is really important, so I need to flush it out, even though maybe I don't have time to do all of that, but I'm not gonna rush this process.
Yeah. And I think before a big launch too, I'll be sitting there, have head down, hours and hours of work, getting everything together. And then usually it's like 2 weeks before it starts and I have a dark night of the soul. It's like a whole day where I'm like, what am I doing? Am I doing the right thing? Can I sustain this? Like even now that I've done it for like 8 years. And so I have to do that to like build myself back up so that I have the balls to go and do the thing. And that's it reminds me of something you talk about bringing Audacity into every day, because I think what a lot of people do is they wait until it's a big thing that is either sort of out of the blue or now it's like, okay, yeah, I'm going to change my whole life. I've never done anything audacious in my whole like ever before. And now this is going to be the big thing. And my whole savings is riding on it. It's like, we could build to that, you know?
Well, that's why it's called Cultivating Audacity, right? That's why the book's called Cultivating, because it's this growth and it's little micro moments. I don't look towards the end result, right? Like you've heard it all, like looking at the process. But for me, it's kind of breaking down what's in my way, what's worth it, what's reckless. So we talked about like fear as a barrier, right? There's time and money, who I think are twins, really, and that you have to know how much you have before you can distribute it. And for those two, it is figuring out, okay, what's important to me? Like I love how you're talking about breaking things down. I personally get buried Everything's urgent for everybody. I get buried in, contracts and expense reports and answer the text, the email, like we always do. All those things that are urgent all the time that are responses to somebody else's request of me. They're requesting, whether it's dinner, sign the permission slip. It can be anything, where things that are important might be driving me forward or my business forward or my family forward. But urgent can suck the life out of the building because it never goes away. So until you create space for what's important, which for me means literally shutting it all down, and writing, like, for example, when I wrote the book, I had to shut everything down 4 times a day for 15 minutes each day so I could get an hour of writing in. And I would, lock the door, sit on the bathroom floor, because every parent of multiple kids knows that's the only place you have privacy, or I'd be writing it in a plane. But creating that space for what's important. Otherwise, urgent just takes over. And then we never get there because the I'll do it when never arrives.
And I don't know about you, but when all of those urgent things take over, I don't always recognize the source of my stress. And so I might blame the thing. A good example of this is oftentimes when we have to go to Michigan, because we go at least once a year, and that is a long trip for 2 kids, especially since we live 3 hours from an airport. So like the whole day, it's like 15 hours of travel.
Yeah.
Anyways, right beforehand, all the time, all of a sudden I start thinking that I don't want to go when I really want to go. but what's actually happening is that, okay, now I'm doing the last minute work stuff and the last minute packing things. And so my nervous system is so high that whatever I'm focused on, my nervous system is going to respond chaotically to that. And so when it comes to going after your big dreams, if you are still in that nervous system state where you're letting everyone else's concerns become your main priority, then it's going to be really hard to find the space to actually realize what you want, let alone go for it.
Right. And it doesn't even have to be the big dreams, right? Can't it be the little things? Can't it be more peace in your day? Can't it be, a more loving relationship? Can't it be getting a new client? Like, it's those little things too, that little moments of audacity can bring you joy and move you forward towards like a life that you enjoy, not a career only, not relationship only, but an entire life you enjoy.
I love the way you're framing this because I've never really connected the idea of just having the audacity to create the moments that you want in your day. It's so simple, but it's so big because all of those little moments in every single day, that's what's making your life. It's not right. The big thing that you did over here, finally going skydiving. It doesn't have to be these big things. It's just like prioritizing yourself.
Yes. So you can enjoy your life. It's interesting to me. I was working out this morning and, people were talking, we're recording this in, what month is it? Is it February right now? And people were talking about like bikini body and this and that. And I thought, I'm working out for my grandma body, not my bikini body. You know what I mean? I'm working out so that when I'm in my 70s, I can hike and live and travel and do all those things. Like that's the audacity of it for me. Like, that's the risk. It isn't for some short-term thing. It's for being able to think big picture and how do I want to feel in my days? And that aligns with what you were just saying, like creating these little moments of joy in my day. That's where I'm creating the audacity. That's why I'm doing it for, not something down the road. I learned that when my friend passed away. We don't know how long we have till down the road. So how about today, right now?
And another thing that requires audacity that also is a huge part of the quality of our life is speaking up for ourselves, because sometimes we have to speak up for ourselves to create these moments, but then also to make, like, people aren't going to sit there and make sure that you're treated fairly or that you get the thing that you're thinking about or whatever it is. Like, you have to learn to be your own advocate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you absolutely do. But that can be easily done with the word no, which is so hard for so many of us, just to say the word no. Or just and to not give the explanation on the end of it. You've talked about boundaries before on your show. I mean, creating your own boundaries that are yours for the life that you want, so you can create the space to make some audacious decisions, to take some bold risks that will serve you today and in the future, to bring you joy, even if it doesn't align with anything that anybody else thinks is important. It doesn't matter. It's what matters to you.
I just saw this reel on Instagram that was like, if introverts actually spoke the truth. And it was like, hey, I'm so sorry. I'm going to have to cancel today. Thank God. I was really hoping you'd cancel. And I was just like, I remember, oh man,
I saw that too.
back in my day,
Uh-huh.
the early stages of the internet. Did you ever play with Stumble Upon, the website?
No.
This was like huge in college for me, and it was like the original social network. Like we didn't have things to just scroll all the time, and so we'd go to Stumble Upon, and literally you just hit stumble and it would just pop up a website you might find interesting, and you could like set
Oh.
your little preferences, filters, what you're interested in, and all of a sudden I'd be like scrolling this website about psychology.
Never heard of that. Yeah.
Well, one of the things I stumbled upon back then was all of a sudden it was a website that was just a how to say no generator. And I remember sitting there being like, I could not get off this website. I was just going through hundreds of excuses. And it was then that I realized I've never really said no to anybody. If I was trying to get out of something, I would make something up. And
Yeah.
and so I was sitting there like studying how to say no. And that was my first sign that I had never had a boundary before and I should probably learn to develop them.
I love that. I never going to stumble upon, but no is hard, right? Without explaining no, because no, I don't want to. And I saw that same TikTok reel and I love it because I always say like, I don't have FOMO. Okay. I don't have a fear of missing out. I probably have JOMO, right? The joy of missing out. Like, hey, you want to go to that party? No. But I do have a fear of staying the same. And that's where Audacity plays a role in my life because I think people think that staying the same is safe, but it actually isn't. The only thing that staying the same does is it ensures no growth is possible. Like for sure, if you never do anything different and you never try, you never risk and you never get uncomfortable, you're for sure not going to grow. So like that's where my fear is in staying the same.
I'm so glad you said that. Just this week, I shared something about changing your mind. It was just this like little quote, just a reminder, you can change your mind about anything and anyone at any time. And I am one of those rapid transformation people. Like my whole life is about learning and figuring out how to be better and like identifying the things I want to change. And I've become really good at it. And so sometimes people in my family will be like, well, you just said this 3 years ago. Like it means something. I'm like, if somebody told me that they've changed their mind on a topic 10 times, I'm going to trust them way more than somebody who's thought the same thing their entire life. But what are you learning? You've never acquired new information. Like I changed my mind about everything the whole time because I just go deeper until I understand.
Right. Exactly. That exploration. So couldn't you apply that to yourself too? By the way, for people that are listening to this and they're thinking, I can't do that thing because, well, what if you changed your mind because you had more information about what your inner critic was telling you, for example? Your inner critic is telling you you're not good enough, you're not ready, you need more money or experience or whatever. But like using that same principle that you talked about, what if you were able to change your mind and say, well, actually, I could apply right now. And if I don't get the job, then I've got some information. Not necessarily like the rejection isn't personal. Now I've got information to go back and get that and come back and apply again. So I love that, changing your mind.
Yeah. What are some of the ways people can practice a little bit of audacity just in their everyday decisions?
No is an excellent one to do it. Doing anything that is unexpected. What I would challenge people to do is to look at what they're afraid of. Like, what are you afraid might happen? And then whose opinion are you taking? I think that is the thing that we could really do on a daily basis. I have a concept in the book called your front row. And your front row is a carefully curated group of people who are doing big things and want to see you succeed. Now, here's the thing, the trick with the front row. It's probably not your mom and it's probably not your best friend because they don't want to see you get hurt, right? They want you to be safe. So your front row are people who are going to hold you accountable and call you to action. So I suggest getting a few friends and telling them the big thing that you want to do. And for me, it was like, okay, I want to write a book. Here's what it is. And it can also be, honestly, like I don't want to be a downer, but a negative thing. Okay, we're getting divorced and I need some support for that too. and here's what it is, and here's what I need. And then they check in with you and hold you accountable and help you get to the thing that you want. Whereas somebody who's, sweet and loving, like your mom, your best friend, they just don't want you to get hurt. So they're going to bound you up. You need somebody who's going to be able to say, take the risk. It's okay. If it doesn't work out, I'm here and I can help you figure out a different way to go for it. Not a different way to say, oh, never mind, I won't do it after all, but a different way to go after it.
I wish people knew that their front row is something that often you have to consciously cultivate.
Oh, yeah.
Because when I first started reading business books in my 20s, different books like How to Win Friends and Influence People or Jim Rohn, I was starting with the classics, and I was trying to, I remember which one it was. It was Napoleon Hill. And I was trying to cultivate my circle of influence, my he calls it something specific, but it's like the original concept of mastermind. And I was like, I don't have anyone. I don't have anyone that I feel like would be good on my circle of influence to run my ideas by. And that was because I hadn't been doing anything in that field before. And now it's interesting to me when I come across friends, I'm very cognizant of when people say oh, I'm just this kind of person, or I'm just, because it's not my worldview. I'm like, if I'm this kind of person and I don't want to be, okay, what do I need to change?
Right.
Reading books on confidence or about going out there, whatever it is. And so it always really stands out to me. And also because none of my friends now, most of my friends are entrepreneurs. I've been going to network groups where I didn't know anybody. I was looking for people on Bumble BFF for a while, looking for other entrepreneurs that have big dreams and have no idea how they're getting there.
That's front row material. Those are front row material people. Yeah.
And I actually found one of my close friends that is somebody I text when I need a pep talk on Bumble BFF.
Yep. I love it. I love it. No, because those are the people that are trying to do big things on their own. And it also creates this sense of social connection. Right? Because our Surgeon General talked about a loneliness epidemic in this country right now, because we can be so, you can have your dinner delivered to you. You can work from home. You can do anything from home. So creating a front row, curating really a front row has a social connection, because when I ask you to be in my front row, now there's a certain significance you have in my life. People take that seriously. People then will come back and check in on you because they know you're counting on them. So it's also a really important way to stay connected and accountable, because we can all just kind of fall away, especially as we're so isolated and working individually. You can fall away, but not when you've got a front row who's expecting you.
Oh, yeah. It's like the mindset version of the old Facebook top 8 friends.
Oh, I don't remember that one either. That's funny.
Yeah, you used to be able to select your top 8. And so you'd go to somebody's profile and they'd be like, oh, they chose me as their top 8. It was the only friends that would preview. It was the original social status.
Right. But that's true though, right? Because now you've got significance there. So you want to make sure you interact with that person because you're top 8. That's interesting.
That is something that's audacious in general, of telling people what they mean to you. I think that's so overlooked. I just did that over the weekend. I was having a love rush for certain people in my life. So I sent 8 little messages about how they're all unique, but basically just saying how I'm glad I know them and that we're growing together and doing life together. And the messages I got back, I was like, I just thought I was going to send these out, but I got the sweetest messages back to me. And I was like, man, I wish I would have known how rewarding this was last week. I would be doing it every single day.
Yeah, right. That's so sweet. I love that. But it's the same concept, significance, creating significance for others in your life.
Have you found that people are aware of how audacious they are in general, or that they need to kind of step back and assess?
No, I don't think so. I think when we put into certain terms that people can understand, they start to see it. A big one that I talk about, especially as women, we're told about the glass ceiling, right? Break the glass ceiling, create new. But that's not our biggest problem. Our biggest problem is the sticky floor, right? We stay on the floor, waiting for the right time to jump, the right moment, until we have all the credentials. And I don't think people are aware of that until it's pointed out that while you're waiting, somebody else is taking the risk. And they're probably living the life that you want. because you're waiting for the right time to get there. And I don't think we're aware of that. And I think that's what your front row is for it to kind of push you off the ledge a little bit and be a parachute. I always say the parachute's not to bail. The parachute is to ensure a softer landing. And that's how your front row can kind of make you aware of your audacious opportunities that you might be missing.
And I think like probably 95% of people have more sticky floor than Audacity with them.
Oh,
you can see it from night one of The Bachelor. It's all the people that the 35 women that come in, and then the one like stands up and goes and takes his time, and all the sticky floor women are all angry that she did that, even though everyone should know after 20 years of this sad show that there are no rules. You just have to do something.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. What an example that is. Right. Like waiting to be chosen.
Oh my gosh. Waiting to be chosen. I don't live in that realm anymore.
Like, I just can't imagine standing there going, pick me. I mean, that's audacity in itself. I'll be the driver of my own life in every way, and my own ideas and my own fears, digging into my own fears and talking to my own inner critic and my own voice and not letting it tell me or make any decisions for me. Yeah.
That was part of the reason why my podcast grew so quickly the first year. I was looking, everyone was epitomizing Apple's new and noteworthy to be selected. Meanwhile, it hadn't been updated in 18 months. And so I started reaching out everywhere that featured podcasts, everywhere. I would write multiple letters a day, pitching my show, asking to be featured. I was featured in almost every single podcast app that year.
Oh,
some of them came at different times. Like I didn't hear anything back. And then like 8 months later, I don't know if they ever saw my email, if it was connected, but what I do know is I put in the effort and the universe met me halfway on the other side.
That's right.
And a lot of them were direct from my emails. And so I wasn't waiting to be chosen. I was putting myself in front of people to increase my chances.
Yep. And there were some, I'm sure, who either just never responded or said no or whatever. Who cares? You weren't featured anyway on there. So it wasn't like they were going to take you off. You know what I mean? I always say, like, you can't fire me. When I'm applying for a job, I don't work for you anyway. So if you don't hire me, no big deal. Like, think about the actual what's at stake here. There was nothing at stake for you. You were trying to get placement. You got placement on a lot of places, and some places you didn't. Big deal. Move on. Next one.
You mentioned those 4 things that get in our way of taking big risks. And a big one, and I think it's the one that I come across the most often. Well, it's the 2 that I come across most often are time and money. Mm-hmm. Money seems like one of those things where people would say, okay, yes, you're right. Maybe I can sit down and write or reschedule and take off some commitments and say no to more people. But money is the one that I can't come up against. What would you say to that?
At Sierra, discover top workout gear at incredible prices, which might lead to another discovery. Your headphones haven't been connected this whole time. Awkward. Discover top brands at unexpectedly low prices. Sierra, let's get moving.
Your data is like gold to hackers. They're selling your passwords, bank details, and private messages. McAfee helps stop them. Secure VPN keeps your online activity private. AI-powered text scam detector spots phishing attempts instantly. And with award-winning antivirus, you get top-tier hacker protection. Plus, you'll get up to $2 million in identity theft coverage, all for just $39.99 for your first year. Visit McAfee.com. Cancel anytime. Terms apply.
Money is the one that I can't come up against. What would you say to that?
Are you sure that you need that much money to start your adventure is the first thing? Because people feel like they need all of their capital all at once. So that's the first thing on money. People want to like have all this money to spend at the time. So I want to just caution people with that first, because you can start working towards your audacious dream without all the funding that you want to have. There's different things that you can do. Then with money, I want to think about, what are you spending your time on that you don't want to do anymore? And can you exchange some of that for money in order to get more energy to do the thing? So as an example, like I said, I dislike doing contracts and stuff. So this is the opposite, I understand, of what you're asking, but I'll get there, is that I had to spend some money to get somebody to do that for me. So I could spend more time prospecting and getting different keynote speaking opportunities and stuff, which made me more money. So looking at how you're spending and creating, because if you're just doing dollar for dollar, my work here, it earns me this much an hour, you're never going to get ahead. And so it's about trying to figure out, how can you leverage energy? If you see money as energy, how can you leverage that a bit to put yourself in a position to create more of whatever it is you want? And in this case, it would be wealth. Like, it's a little bit of a vicious circle.
Yeah. I put $3,000 on a brand new credit card that I opened specifically for this to start my podcast. I had no money at the time. I was like definitely living paycheck to paycheck, sometimes overdrafting my account. And I took out a credit card. And it's interesting the different reactions I get when I've shared that story. I've had people attack me saying, "You're promoting people being reckless with their spending." And I'm like, I'm actually trying to be honest, because I don't know how else to say how I started. I didn't have it in me to actually sit there and save money. Maybe some people want to go that way, but I was never good at that, especially at that age. I was too impulsive. If I had tried to save before I started, I would have spent it on something else dumb. I know that version of me. And so I just went bold and I opened a new credit card and I put it all on because I wanted it so bad. And for me, I knew I wanted it so bad because I had actually spent the last couple of months sitting there and digging into my brain about why I wanted this so much and what I saw in it. And I had no guarantees that anything was going to work. I was actually launching a podcast, and what people were saying was a saturated market with no idea of how I was going to monetize yet. But I just knew there was something in this. I felt it. And so I did put it all on a credit card. Now I know, now that I have a lot of very successful people around me, it's interesting because a lot of people are like, well, yeah, you've started this because you have all this money to start it. And a lot of them, I've realized, my wealthy friends don't usually use their own money to start things. They get investments, but they have a different relationship with money. So they feel better about asking for it. So they're just carrying themselves different around it. They've sat there and they've built up their pitch deck so that they can confidently present their new idea, and then they get other people to fund it, even though they could easily do it. And so there's so many different routes of not having it, where you could, if you wanted it bad enough, when you get to the point of staying the same is scarier than whatever the risk is, which sometimes you have to do your own work to get there so that you don't just sit in your own pile of sad tears.
Yeah. And when you have to know your money story, like you got to, and that one does come from your childhood. People always want to go, but it goes back to your childhood. I remember I was living in Colorado with my then husband in February, and we were roasting in the house. I mean, it's snowing, dumping outside, and I'm roasting, and I kept turning the heat down. He kept turning it up. And finally I said, why do we have to roast? And he was like, I didn't have heat growing up. We can afford heat. We're going to have heat. And it was the first time I had heard that. I didn't know that growing up, his family had their heat turned off several times because money was such a stressor and so many bills. So we had to kind of unpack that. Like, yes, now we can afford heat, but like, you're wanting to spend the money because now you have it is an overreaction to your money story. So it's really important. And in the book, I kind of take you through diving in, because each one is so personal, and it will explain how your relationship with money has put some really base ideas in your head about how you want to do the thing. And for some people, it's like they hold it so tight, they don't want to spend any of it, and they need to spend some and invest. And for others, it's, hey, if I have it, I'm going to spend it because I never had it before.
This reminds me of something we were talking about earlier, of deciding, like, is this the person that you want to be influencing your decisions? And it's something I realized early on. I remember when my husband and I were talking to my stepdad about like this idea we had. And at the time, I thought I was launching a travel blog. Like I said, I tried a bunch of different things, and I did launch a travel blog, played in that for a while. I was like, this isn't it. I don't care to be known for this, whatever it was. But anyways, I remember this conversation, and my stepdad just kept saying, well, you got to get a real job while you do this. You can't just, and I remember feeling triggered at first, like, God, you never support me. But then I just had some stillness with it. I was meditating, and I was like, wait, he's actually just trying to keep me safe. And other people's reactions to what I want to do are a really great insight into their mind. And that could be the things that came from their childhood or the way they live their life. But essentially, it's often the cage that they're living in. You can see the cage that they're living in. Do you want to go into that cage with them? Or do you want to go further than they would let themselves go? And when you get to that, you can to me, the moment I realized that, I'm like, okay, yes, I'm going to pass that one to the side. It becomes really easy to not take that into consideration. But I'm curious for you, because a lot of my insights come through meditation. How do you really get to the root of what it is, whether it's your deeper why or where the wound is coming from? Like, what's your process for really getting to the heart of something?
So I'm not an artistic person at all, right? I'm a 100% sports person, word person, not at all math either. But what I found, as I was writing the book, was I actually use colored pencils and sketch. And it doesn't matter what it is, but there's something about me telling myself, okay, this is the time that I get to kind of float and run in and out of ideas and come back, because I'm such a linear person and I have schedules for everything. But now I've trained my brain that when I pick up that pencil, that means like, let's get creative. Let's think of different ways to attack this problem, or let's figure out what's really bothering me. So let's just call it for a bit and figure out, like, I can feel the pit in my stomach. But what is it that's bothering me? So for me, it's doing something that's so outside of my natural strengths, that it allows me to explore a little bit.
Oh, I'm going to try that. My two ways, meditation is really good, but I try to do mantra meditations. So sometimes I let my train of thought go too long and it really does help, but I'm like, this is not the purpose of why I'm here. I'm trying to unattach.
Yeah.
But the other one that's really helpful for me is I use voice recorders while going on a walk. And I found often it's not even as much about getting to the heart of it and realizing that it's not as bad. Something about it is even just approaching that topic. Like when I have the fear, it's like something won't let me go there. And so going there just in a voice recorder and actually talking about it, all of a sudden makes it more tangible and I can work with it in a way. And in a weird way, I find this related, but I did this a lot when I was healing from an eating disorder. When I would have this impulse, and if I went my normal route, it's like I would like have something, talk myself into why this food was okay, even though I knew it was a trigger food. And then all of a sudden I'd find myself going into a spiral, and then I'd be like in a binge and purge cycle. But then I started to realize that if I spoke it out loud and just said, no, you're going to eat this cookie and you're going to say it's okay, but then you're going to have those feelings. You're going to want another one because it's a trigger food. Then you're going to have another one. You're going to feel like you've gone too far. And then you're going to be like, well, now I've gone too far. So you're going to have a whole binge. And I would say it out loud and I could actually hear it. Suddenly it was real. And I'd be like, that's crazy. I'm not going to do that. But if I didn't say it out loud for like a good year period, I would just find myself in this subconscious process. And so even though it's sort of unrelated, it kind of is, where it's like, okay, let's just write it down. Like, let's engage with it instead of letting the fear stop me like it's trying to do. Like, go further. Even if it's not doing the thing, it's unraveling the thing. And maybe you change your relationship with it through the process.
I love it. And it isn't unrelated in my mind, because that fourth barrier that we talk about is the inner critic. And kind of like the conversation you were having with yourself, that's what you need to have with the inner critic is, maybe a phrase that's not very helpful right now, but it is separating the inner critic from yourself. Like the easy example I have is my 12-year-old daughter. I picked her up from 6th grade last year at one point, and I was like, hey, honey, how's school? And she's like, well, I'm stupid. I can't do math. And oh, by the way, I'm fat. And I was like, wow, like that's a lot. Welcome to middle school. And as we talked about it, I said, would you say those things to somebody else? It's the standard thing that we say. And she's like, of course not. And I said, okay, so her name is Lena. If Lena doesn't talk that way, then let's give a name to the inner critic that's saying that to you, because that isn't the way that you talk, just any name, and not somebody you know. And so she said Jerry was her name. And I said, what would you say to Jerry if he walked up to you and said those things, right? Like, you're dumb, you don't do math. No, by the way, you're fat. And she said, I'd say, shut up, Jerry. And I said, okay, so when we separate it from ourselves, there's some power in that. So still, I'm in my office right now. If she's in the kitchen doing her work and I hear her go, "Oh, I can't do this," I'll yell, "Shut up, Jerry." And it'll just take her out of that moment. Kind of the way that you were talking about going down the rabbit hole of what happens if you eat this cookie in your mind and talking it all out. Same idea with our inner critic. And then you can have a phrase. For me, I will say to my inner critic, that's not very helpful right now. Because maybe they're giving you some data you can use, but a lot of times that's not helpful. And then you're just kind of acknowledging this isn't going to go away. My inner critic's going to be with me. My voice is going to be with me. It may have a few nuggets of help, but a lot of times it's just there trying to stop me from doing anything different.
I have so much to say about what you just said. First, I recently had a speaking engagement, and the night before I could feel my nerves coming up. And I had a conversation where I just said, okay, let me try the speaking out loud again. And so I just told myself, like, okay, I get that you're trying to keep me safe, but we don't need this right now. You've got this. You've practiced this many hours. Look at all the cool shit that you're doing. And I just started giving myself this really big pep talk. And I felt better almost immediately. But I've done the thing where I've named the problem. That was also really helpful in eating disorder healing, by the way. And even separating, like, my alter ego is Clementine, like the one who tries to self-sabotage, that's Clementine. But you said a sentence where you said, well, if Lena doesn't talk like that, then what should we name it? That kind of connected two tools in a way that I've never really connected it. Because often we'll hear, well, if you wouldn't say that to a friend, why is it okay to say it to you?
Right.
I haven't heard, okay, if you wouldn't say that to a friend, that's not something you would say. You're not that kind of person. So this isn't
right.
You. That is such an important distinction, because another helpful tool that has really worked for me is just understanding how the brain works, because it's another way to kind of be like, okay, well, it's not me. It's the brain doing what the brain does. It's trying to keep me safe. But just that line of like, if she wouldn't talk like this, then that's not you. That is so clear.
Right. Exactly. It isn't. I mean, if you wouldn't say it to somebody else, why are you saying it to yourself? It isn't your voice.
What do you say to someone who keeps preparing, keeps researching, thinking that this is their version of taking action, but they never actually take the leap?
Yeah, that's why you need a front row, because that is the sticky floor personified, waiting until you have everything that you think you need. Meanwhile, somebody else is swinging for the fences and living your life. So what's the first action you can take? What's the first thing? The biggest, the thing that I think helps the most with that is make it public. It's one of the things that's in my book. I talk about make it public. Once you make it public, you can't take it back. I was speaking, and in QAA afterwards, a couple of years ago, somebody said to me, "What's next?" And I said, "I'm going to write a book about Audacity." Dang it! I just said that out loud. Now I have to write a book about Audacity. So I think if you're stuck in that, make it public, because then there'll be other people who ask you about it. How's that book going? It's the same idea.
I always say that at some point, more learning is just a fancy form of procrastination.
Yeah.
And I lived there for a really long time. Because you can act like you're doing something, you can convince yourself you're not putting it off. But if a mentor of mine actually recently said something that he's always heard his dad say, and this really depends on what you're going for, but it affected me, because he said every day he would tell his dad, like, oh, well, I did this and this happened and I made this connection. And his dad would say, yeah, but son, how much money did you put in the bank account? And that's not, but he meant it in a good way, because he was using his dad as like a mentor to actually make money, and realizing that quite often, what's a quote that I saw that I also love? It was something like, if you don't know where you're going, distractions look like opportunities. And so I've definitely had that quite a bit, where I'm like, yeah, I'm not making any money, but like I'm doing this and I'm growing my brand this way. And that might not be your measurement. So that exact question might not always be applicable, but figure out what is your measurement of success, and come back to that over and over again, because it's so easy to be caught up in your momentum. You just start doing something, and before you know it, you've taken the wrong turn for like 6 miles and you got to turn around.
Yeah. That makes sense to me, because again, it feels good to be busy, but you may just be treading water.
Yeah. I'm curious about your reevaluation loop. How often do you personally reassess your path so that you don't go 6 miles the wrong direction and then you're like, oh, now I got to go back and start where I was? But what triggers you to know that it's time for a change?
For me, it's constant because I've been doing it so long. So I'm always like super in tune. Everything shows up in my body. So if I've got a little something in my stomach or a little bit of chest pressure, I know that something's not sitting right. And when you talk about the reevaluation loop, there's an assessment in the book. And after I wrote the assessment, I took it. And you're assessing your satisfaction and your contentment with where you are in your professional and career life, in your health and wellness, and in your relationships, is the way I broke it down. You can certainly apply it to any different part of your life. And I'm constantly thinking about those things. And after I took my assessment, I'm like, yeah, career is going really well. Things are doing well. Health and wellness, yeah, I feel great. I'm doing the right things for my health. Relationships, because I'm so mired in all my work and doing my work and writing the book and this and that. And my relationships with my kids are great. And I spend a lot of time, but my relationships with my friends, I was kind of leaving them hanging there to a degree because I wasn't nurturing them thinking they'll always be there. And so for me, I was like, okay, let's adjust that now. Now, as we adjust that, how's everything going? Am I working out enough? Maybe I can combine my friends and my workout together to try to keep that relationship. So it isn't like I say, okay, now I'm going to enter the reevaluation loop. For me, it is constant evaluation and tweaking because, as I said, I'm not thinking like long term. When I get to this point, then I will have made it, or I'm going to be happy, or whatever it is. For me, it's constant. How am I feeling today? How's my life working? Is everything functioning the way that I want it to? If it's not consistently, then let's figure out why.
Yeah. It's taken me a while to get to the point of it being constant. And now I can confidently say that it is 98% of the time. But there was a long period where I would like get somewhere and I would be in it for too long, where I'm like, I just don't understand why this doesn't feel good. I thought I'd like set this up. And it's like, or just more so, the reason I'd stay there so long is I would be blaming things externally, like, maybe I don't like this house, or maybe I shouldn't live in the city anymore. And then I'm like, wait, why do you feel dis-ease right now? Like, what is it? Maybe it has nothing to do with these things. And you're just like latching on to the first thing that you see. And so you're waking up and your room is too small, or you don't have enough stuff to wear, but no, again, sit in stillness, ask yourself, where is this coming from? Oh, I have been working on this project and now I'm realizing, like, as it grows, it's just more and more responsibility. And I don't want this type of responsibility. I forgot to schedule in that I don't like this. I don't want that. Like, really getting specific on what it is that I do and don't want in my life, how long I will entertain those things in the name of growth, or do I have a path to outsource this specific task?
Right.
I'm all of a sudden like I'm developed a program where I need to do a ton of sales calls the whole time, and I don't want to do that. Like, all of a sudden I'm realizing the thing I'm creating isn't the thing, so I need to step back and reevaluate. But it took me a long time to get to the point of saying, like, wait, something's not feeling good. Let me just do this work now and save myself 6 months.
Yeah, it's that dis-ease that you said. I play into that too.
Well, we've covered so much here today, talking about the difference between confidence and audacity, talking about how to actually get there over time, reframing our understanding of it. But I'd love to leave listeners with one thing to think about or do to bring a little bit more audacity into their daily life this week. What would you leave them with?
What's something that nobody expects you to do, small, that you could do today? Is it saying no to an obligation? Is it being vulnerable in a way with a friend where you haven't? Is it checking in with somebody, making time for them that you normally wouldn't do? Just a little bit of something out of the ordinary can renew you and spin you in a different way. So, like, yes, dream big about your audacious goal, and today do something unexpected.
Well, for listeners who want to get the full experience with your book, where's the best place they can find it and connect with you?
Sure. You can buy the book anywhere you buy your books, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, local bookstores. You can also read the first chapter free at my website, AnneMarieAnderson.com. There's an E on the end of Anne. And I did that because I wanted people to be able to kind of dip in themselves and see how the book works, because it's not just me saying, you can do it, you'll be great. It is literally taking you through, okay, let's dig into these barriers, fear, time, money, or inner critic, and figure out why you do the things you do. So my website's the best place to start, AnnMarieAnderson.com, or you can find me on Instagram at AnnMarieAndersonTV.
All the links from this episode will be at mindlove.com/393. So here's something to think about. You know about my weird fear of speaking up during massages. I'm sure you're tired of hearing about it, but last time, I promise. Because at first, it was just a thing I noticed about myself. But then, without realizing it, I adopted it. It was a joke, but it was also true. Like, yeah, I could do anything except that. I don't know what it is, it just terrifies me. I'm not going to. It became a part of my identity. And that sounds extreme, but that's exactly how it works. And once I started identifying with it, I reinforced it. Every time I told that story, I made it more true. Stories shape how we see ourselves, and how we see ourselves determines what we believe we can do. So what happens when you change the story? Even just a little. That's why I want to offer you the Story Alchemist tool. It's a really simple way to take one experience and reframe it in a way that serves you. And you can actually do it over and over again with different experiences if you want. Because the way you tell your story matters more than you think. Well, this tool I'm giving you feels like magic. It's going to reframe one of your life experiences, and it's going to show you something deep that you may not have seen from it before. So you'll walk away with a whole new understanding of yourself. One that actually moves you forward instead of keeping you stuck in the same patterns. So go grab the Story Alchemist tool now and see what shifts for you. You can find it at mindlove.com/reframe. That's mindlove.com/reframe. You can find all my amazing sponsors at mindlove.com/sponsors. And if you're not already getting my morning Mind Love emails, sign up at mindlove.com or text the word morning to 33777. Thanks for giving your mind a little love today, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks for tuning into Your Higher Frequency with Mind Love. Head to mindlove.com for a free gift to keep your vibes up until next week.